Kirby Smart took over the Georgia program in 2016. What are his top 5 wins? I'm going to tell you right now.
2016, the win over Auburn in Athens.
That was an unranked Georgia team, Matt, that beat Auburn 13-7. That was Kirby's first win over a top 10 team. As it stands today, he's 7-4 over top 10 in top 10 games. That was his first win. It was a huge upset for Georgia over Auburn.
It was Kirby's guy, Mo Smith, who came up with the big pick 6 in that game. Georgia's offense was struggling like it had been a lot that second half of the year, but it was Kirby's defense who really stepped up, made a lot of plays, and that Mo Smith pick 6 was the play of the game. I think it gave Georgia the lead and they held on, if I remember correctly, but the place was rocking. It always is in Sanford Stadium for Georgia-Auburn. Auburn was coming in playing great football, and Kirby got the job done, and as bad as that season was going, that was something that Georgia fans really needed.
Through the 2019 season, Kirby's teams have had 7 come from behind or tied and come from behind victories. This was the first, well, this was one of many in the 2016 season, actually. They did it 5 times that year, Dylan. They were tied with Auburn late 7-all, and they wound up winning the game 13-7.
Well, I remember a big thing in that game was the offense wasn't doing great, but Jacob Eason still looked pretty. That was one of his better games.
Yeah, he looked okay.
And he had some good passes. He didn't have a touchdown that game. But I remember that was one of the first games I covered, and that was what I ended up writing about for that game, was just how solid he ended up looking at one of the few times that year that he did.
Well, he was a young quarterback. He really had a hard time. Kirby had a big part in playing young quarterbacks at the beginning of his career at Georgia. What was the number 4 game on our list?
2019 Florida.
So why we put this one in here? This is one of Kirby's one of his several top 10 wins. But if you don't remember going into that game, Georgia had lost to South Carolina, wasn't really playing so hot. They were favored to win the game, but the national media, I can't recall a time when Georgia was so picked against as a favorite. And Matt, that game was not just because of that, but because of what the momentum it seemed like the Gators had at the time and how important the game was to the season. I mean, if Florida wins that game, they go play for the playoff.
I think Florida was 6, Georgia was 8, something like that. They were ranked behind Florida. Most of the national analysts were picking Florida to win the game. I think Florida had one loss, and it was a close loss to LSU in Baton Rouge.
2-touchdown loss, yeah.
Right, but hung with it. But Florida was a team that was playing better than people thought, and a lot of people thought they were starting to really connect and thought that they could beat Georgia in this game. And Georgia was clearly the better team. We talked about it a bunch after that game, of course, but Jake Fromm, big game, and that was something that Kirby Smart really needed in the middle of this year, won them the East.
And Jake Fromm killed the Gators again, Dylan.
That was one of his few great games, yeah. I thought. 20 completions on 30 attempts, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and the game-sealing pass that I think you wrote about after to, who was it, Eli Wolf?
Yeah.
On a, unglamorous play, but maybe the biggest play of the game.
Oh, it was either the biggest play of the game. Well, the defense completely dominated that game.
Yeah.
Until the fourth quarter, and the Gators got it going a little bit.
Georgia's defensive line played excellent.
But the thing about it was, Lawrence Cager was wide open, still is wide open. Kirby's reaction to that play, Dylan, you shot that shot. It was one of the best shots of the decade, believe it or not. And Kirby was going bonkers as usual.
He just looks like a kid almost.
He loves it.
He looks more like a cartoon, I would say. The look on his face with his hands in the air, and he's not running, but he's marching downfield. It's just, I don't know.
Well, he was pretty excited after the Brian Herrien catch, too, because that was right in front of him.
That was a great catch, by the way. But that game was such a big deal because, if you've never been to Georgia, Florida, it's hard to understand the gravity of that game, the importance, the dislike on both sides. That game means so much, even if nothing is on the line.
There's a lot of stress and anxiety going on within the stands there.
Yeah, you sat in the stands and worked.
I worked. I was shooting the game on the Florida side. Oh, they were after the Lawrence Cager catch, some of them I think looked over the bridge and felt like they wanted to jump off. There were some that were crying. There were some that were, hands in their palms. It was a scene to be shooting, in the middle of a giant Florida crowd watching that fourth quarter.
That hurt the Florida fan base. That really hurt the narrative.
They were confident.
They thought Dan Mullen was going to outcoach Kirby. It didn't happen. And that was Georgia's number 4 win in Kirby's time. What was number 3?
2017 Notre Dame.
One of our favorite dog post trips.
That would have been number 1
trip-wise?
on trip-wise if it was an SEC trip.
Well, this is the number 1 regular season win for Kirby Smart, according to us. Without going too much down the list.
Why was this such a big deal? It was game 2 in a season. Jake Fromm's thrown in there. He didn't play unreal. He was...
His first start.
Let me check the stats. 16 of 29, a pick. The pick was bad. The touchdown, the throw to Terry, he only had 141 yards. He took a couple sacks.
Miko dropped a for sure touchdown.
Yeah, he did.
That was huge. But we asked the Georgia players prior to the Notre Dame game this year, hey, was the win 2 years ago what kind of jump-started that 2017 season and the program where it is today? And a lot of them said, yeah, that was huge.
It was either that game or the Mississippi State game, but you don't get the Mississippi State game without the Notre Dame win.
It was a close, and they won it at the end with defense. And that was Georgia was a team that could put teams away at that point, and you knew that they were for real for the rest of the season after that.
That was a hell of a game. What did you see from where you were at up there? Other than a bunch of red.
Just how... That's when I about knew that Jake Fromm was going to be serviceable at least that season, mostly because of how good Nick and Sony were, but also that he was just playing solid that year.
Yeah.
That game specifically in his very first start, it wasn't anything crazy, but it just looked solid enough, especially with those two guys, to make do.
I tell you what, before that game, Roquan Smith was good, but Roquan Smith absolutely destroyed Notre Dame, and so did Lorenzo Carter. He had the game of his life, and then Davin Bellamy made the play of his life at the end.
And those are two, and we're completely forgetting here the Terry Godwin catch.
Well, I thought I mentioned
you mentioned it briefly,
earlier.
but that was one of the biggest plays of the year.
It was an amazing catch, but it was an amazing catch because it was an amazing catch in a perfect moment at Notre Dame.
Third down.
I nailed the shot, as usual. But it was a great moment. A lot of photographers nailed that shot, but it was a moment in time. It was an important moment in time, and Georgia still has. We didn't put the Notre Dame win from the 2019 season on, even though that was a clash of top 10 teams. That Notre Dame team was number 9 coming into that game.
Yeah.
No, they weren't even number 9. They were higher than that. They were number 7.
All right.
But the Notre, you don't get. I don't know that you get everything that came in the 2017 season and after. Georgia hadn't exactly lost a lot of football games since they beat Notre Dame up there.
They wouldn't have gone to the playoff if they would have lost that game at Notre Dame too.
Way.
So
we say no way. Auburn had 2 losses and came into that game. They probably would have gone to the playoff, but it was the win that really mattered.
Yeah,
for sure. Number 2.
2017 SEC championship.
I said it before, this is the biggest Georgia-Auburn game ever in over 100 years of playing football. This was the biggest Georgia-Auburn game ever. Winner goes to the playoff. Auburn was ranked number 2. Georgia was number 4 or 5.
They were 6.
6?
But it was pretty well implied if they won that game,
right,
they were going to the playoffs. There was no question about it.
Absolutely. Auburn strikes first. They go up 7-0.
They came very close to taking control of that game, Auburn. But then
Georgia dominated that second half.
Well, you're skipping the part that, and you might not recall
the block field goal.
Daquan Hawkins-Muckle.
Daquan Hawkins.
Yeah. He burst through, or I don't know what he did, but he got that giant meat hook up in the air and blocked it, and just saw the sideline erupt.
Dom Blaylock took it like 15 yards down the sideline.
Dom Sanders.
Right.
A hell of a player for Georgia, and he was a guy that made a lot of plays, including in that game. Now, it's hard to think of that game without thinking of Roquan getting the fumble or whatever it was.
First play of the fourth quarter. But before that, Davin Bellamy with the strip sack when they were in field goal range.
That was huge.
That was huge. That was one of the biggest game-changing moments there.
But the Swift run, another great Kirby image, this time from Wes Muhlenberg. Kirby, again, getting a freak background deal going on. He loves to hate Auburn. That had to have been a big moment for him. 28-7 victory.
And it might have been the biggest run of Swift's career. I don't know about the best one.
It might be.
But it might be the biggest, most important run.
Great call by Scott Howard on that, too. He takes it back to Philadelphia. I mean, that's how it was. That place erupted, and he broke through, and he was gone. And just a sigh of relief, from all the Georgia fans out in the stadium, because it was over then.
Yeah, it was definitely.
It was over then.
Made it 28-7.
Yeah.
But if it was probably over.
Yeah.
But that cinched it, and that was the ball game. That was a hell of a night for Georgia. The question was, I remember talking to Chuck
Dowdle.
Chuck Dowdle after the game. He said, where do you think? Do you think they're going to the Rose Bowl? I thought it was for sure they're going to the Rose Bowl. The question is, who will they play? Probably Oklahoma. And then soon thereafter, the question was, are they going to deal with is Alabama going to get in? Was the giant question.
It was Alabama or Ohio State.
And it turned out to be.
And they got it right.
Well, apparently. The number one Kirby win on our list.
It had to be the Rose Bowl, the game right after.
Yeah, it was such a great event. They totally know. Sugar Bowl is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But the Rose Bowl is just so different.
It was special.
Part of it's because it's in California. Part of it's because of the parade. Part of
the
it's
tradition of it.
The whole deal.
It's 70 degrees.
It was really
it was
nice.
Beautiful.
It was great.
Is that the biggest Georgia win since the national championship in 1980? Was that?
I think that might be right. In 2002 SEC championship is a big deal. I'm not sure how many programs have a Rose Bowl win, let alone two?
Especially from the SEC.
Oh yeah, Georgia has two, and it's just uncommon. But let's not skip past the game. You beat the Heisman Trophy winner. You narrowly got. The game was epic. In theory, it was a
heavyweight bout, back and forth.
Second best Rose Bowl ever.
Yeah. First overtime Rose Bowl.
I don't know if it was the best college football game because Texas SC, and a lot of people would say, hey,
if you remember watching that game, that Texas USC game was just unreal. This comes close.
This wasn't so far behind.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is just these didn't have the stakes.
This wasn't a national championship game, but it was damn sure close.
Semifinal.
It was, and Clemson. Alabama just kind of walked the dog against Clemson later that night, which was what everyone thought would happen. But it was the OU Georgia still stands as one of the most watched football games of this century in college football. We just got the numbers back here lately for the college football semifinals for Clemson, Ohio State. Ohio State has huge viewership. It was almost 9 million fewer viewers than watched Georgia, Oklahoma. That game is going to be a classic for a long time. It was a huge win for Kirby.
Oklahoma was up 17.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield said it was over. He was running, doing the arm thing. It was over. And then Rodrigo with the field goal really changed the game. And
it was the longest of his career, wasn't it? Was that was a 55-yard?
Yep, Rose Bowl record. And it did change the game. Georgia came out there and didn't put it all on Jake Fromm. They ran the football, and they continued to run all over him.
But that defense was they were a holy terror out there. And then the Georgia fan base, which was probably, looking back at it, about 65% of the crowd. It looked like more and more.
It was tough to tell with the Sooner.
But you could see after the game with the photos we've got.
Second game in a row where Georgia got a turnover on the first play of the fourth quarter. They did it against Auburn, that SEC title game, with Roquan picking that up. And then Dom Sanders with the interception on that first play, took it back inside the 5.
The game felt over then.
Yeah.
It felt like Oklahoma was done, and then you had.
But then Sony fumbled. They go back on top. The whole game was crazy. It was back and forth.
It was a crazy game, but I again want to go back to what served as our photo of the decade at Dog Post, which was the shot of Kirby
fist pumping in the air. Was that what? I mean,
No, it's the one that Dylan took with the Rose Bowl logo and the sideline exploding.
Right.
Dropping some mad profanity in the middle of the photo.
That's right. That's what Kirby does.
Tell us about that moment. You saw it. You stuck with it.
Well, it's just weird because you usually don't see it. The coach usually jogs out there on his way to shake the other coach's hand, but he was just by himself, not surrounded by anyone. He didn't have the state trooper with him, which you always see the coach with.
Yeah.
And he was...
He took off on the trooper.
Yeah,
man.
he was a good 10, 15 yards in front of everyone.
Jake Fromm played, I mean, that final drive
That was a great performance.
was about as well as he's played.
Yeah, that might have been his first truly great statistical game too.
20 of 29. He had 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 220 yards. He was sacked twice. But before the Carolina game that year, he really wasn't asked to do a ton. He played pretty well against Missouri and Notre Dame, but they said to him, "You got to go tie this game, bro. You got a minute. If you don't tie this game, we're going to lose." And they put it on his back, and he went and he did it.
Javon Wims, that catch was a fantastic catch. I think it was the touchdown.
There was pass interference, and then eventually Nick just broke through.
It was in the middle of the fourth quarter, and then the next possession's when Nick scored with a minute left.
What about the block punt, though? I mean, there were so many moments in this game.
The block kick?
The block kick.
Lorenzo Carter.
Did you think immediately Georgia had won, Matt, at that point?
At that point, I said they're going to win.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I thought they would won.
Did y'all think that they should have called holding on Jake Fromm when he was holding on the outside?
He was holding.
He was obviously holding. It was
You
awesome.
you can't call it, but he was holding.
Must have known that.
They had Jake Fromm out there blocking on this great play. Trey Blunt was in the play. Isaiah McKenzie was in on that play.
Alden Bynum was in on that play. Number 42. No, yeah, he was.
That's so weird.
That was something.
He was in on that play.
A lot of weird dogs on the field there, but it worked out.
It worked out, and he ran it right at us.
You got a great shot of him crossing the goal line when he's
the best
getting into the end zone.
image of it is where I put a remote camera. Dog Post's a little psychotic about imagery.
Little bit.
And that was obviously well worth it. And you can see the sideline erupt and come onto the field. And it was complete pandemonium. One problem was that we didn't know where they were going to play the overtime. And so on the sideline, it was a zoo on that sideline. Because they said, we're just playing on this sideline, which was going into the Redcoats.
Right.
And Sony, when he got that, it was extremely crowded on that sideline. It's close to fist fight time with a lot of these guys. But when he broke through, he ran right into, the national championship, right to Atlanta. It was a hell of a moment for him, the team, and Kirby. It's our number one game. It's a number one win for Kirby Smart so far.
All right, those are our top 5 wins. Who are the top 5 running backs all time at Georgia? You can click right here and find out. Tell me what you think.